back, listeners, to another episode of the Mindful Living podcast with your host, Sana. Now, today in this episode, we are diving deep into a topic that affects so many of us: grief, mental illness, and burnout. We all experience loss, listeners, whether it's the loss of a loved one, a dream, or even a sense of self. And in today's fast paced world, burnout is more common than ever. It is real and it is happening. But how do we exactly navigate these challenges with grace, resilience, and self compassion? And to help me with this conversation, we have our guest, Becky McCoy. She's an engaging writer and speaker on spiritual formation who helps women who are disillusioned with their faith bravely face difficult life circumstances with tenderness. As a young widow, Becky has walked through deep grief, learned to live with anxiety and depression, and she has developed a new perspective on suffering. And with a master's in Christian theology and spiritual formation, she guides others in discovering gentle, trauma informed ways of being and believing. And she's also in training to become a spiritual director and is currently writing a book on contemplative spiritual practices for grief, mental illness, and burnout. Fun fact for all of your listeners: Becky has been featured in The Mighty, Babel, and many other publications. So I am honored to have her on the show today, and I know her insights would resonate with so many of us. So, Becky, welcome to the show, and it's an absolute honor to have you with us today.
Thank you so much, Sana.
Okay, Becky, before we talk about your book and the topics on grief, mental illness, burnout, can you share a bit about your journey? What led you to focus on contemplative spiritual practices, particularly in the context of grief and mental illness?
So I grew up in a faith community that was focused very much on faith being an intellectual practice and about learning. And as I experienced loss of my dad, of my husband, of many other people close to me, and really struggled to learn to live with anxiety and depression, I realized that I needed something more. I needed practices that would involve my body and my heart and my mind. And so I started exploring different contemplative practices and found them extremely valuable.
Well, I think that's such a powerful story, Becky. I imagine that grief and mental illness can feel incredibly isolating. And many of us are familiar with traditional spiritual practices, but contemplative spirituality, I think it often gets overlooked. That's what I think. So, can you explain, Becky, what contemplative spiritual practices are and how they differ from other faith based approaches?
Contemplative practices are rooted, as the name is, in contemplation. And you're exactly right. We overlook them so often, but they're ways to practice being present in the moment and to be aware of what's going on in your heart, mind, and body, and allowing there to be a connection between those things. So people will throw out meditation as a contemplative practice, but meditation in itself is such a broad topic. There are so many different kinds of meditation. So you could think about there's breath prayer, so it's a breathing exercise that's combined with a prayer or a mantra or repetitive words. And it is incredible how it allows you um, to just experience the moment a little differently. A friend and writer, Charlotte Donlan, defines spirituality as the ways that we connect with ourselves, connect with each other, connect with the world around us, and connect with the divine. And so contemplative practices really allow us to do all of those things in ways that are accessible and that are sensitive and honoring of our limitations, whether due to grief or mental illness.
Mm, okay, okay. That's fascinating. So, Becky, for someone who has never engaged in any of these practices before, what would be a simple, approachable way to start?
That's a great question, and one that's a little overwhelming because there are so many different great ways to start. Um, I mean, it depends on the person. So say if you are interested in art or looking at beautiful things, I would encourage you to go to a museum or pull up a painting on the internet and
Mm,
practice visio divina. It's basically, which means the divine seeing, and it's basically sitting and looking and just noticing what jumps out at you, what feelings come up for you, and there's no pressure to figure out what they mean or learn anything. It's just noticing. Or labyrinth walking is one of my very favorites.
okay.
A labyrinth is like a maze, but it's only one path to the center, and then you take the same path back out. And the idea is that you walk it slowly with nice and slow, long breaths. And as you walk towards the center, you just let go of the things that are weighing you down. And in the center, and as you walk back out, you let yourself fill back up. And the beauty of it is that because there's only one path, you don't have to make any choices, which is a relief often. And if you don't have access to a labyrinth, you can just pick a route. You can walk around your block 3 times, or you can walk to the park and back, just anything that you're not making choices along the way. So I would recommend definitely starting with those 2, and, in my podcast, in my upcoming book, I'll go deeper into other ones, just to kinda help people discover what are contemplative practices that are meaningful and helpful for them.
Wow. So it's more of like a symbolic practice, for example.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah, because you mentioned about labyrinth walking, it's more of like what I understood is it's more like a moving meditation, and it's kind of symbolizing the life we are living, whether it's more like a maze or it's like a direct path
Yep.
or something. Yeah. So I think that's really really amazing. That's really amazing. Also, Becky, one of the things you emphasize is a trauma informed approach to spirituality. Why is this so important, and how does it change the way we engage with faith?
Oh, it's so important. Many of us grew up in faith communities that had very rigid understanding of faith and life, and you must do it this way, otherwise you are condemned or you are ostracized from the community, or so there was only one very specific way that you're allowed to live. And being trauma informed is really helpful in recognizing that many people have spiritual trauma from the ways that they grew up. Many people have grief trauma. And so making a one size fits all approach to faith practices and spirituality, it's just not helpful because it re-traumatizes people and it doesn't help people move towards healing. So when we're trauma informed and incorporating that into our faith practice and our spirituality, we are honoring the suffering that we've experienced and the things that we're healing from. And instead of continuing to be rigid and dogmatic about um, what what practices you must include and how you must practice them, it's a
Mhm.
little bit more freeing of just allowing you to explore and discover and be curious about ways that you naturally connect with the divine and with the world and with yourself.
Mhm. Wow. Wow. So I think one of the biggest factor here is practicing self-compassion, and
Mhm.
self-compassion and forgiveness, they are related. We have so many situations, it can be related to um, our childhood or our past experiences. Maybe we are not able to forgive others, or most importantly, we are not able to forgive ourselves. Uh, so,
Mhm.
so I think self compassion and forgiveness, they play a big role here.
Absolutely.
Mm. Also, since we are talking on burnout as well, it's such a big issue today. Unfortunately, there are so many misconceptions lying around burnout, but burnout is actually there. And the most vicious part of burnout is that we often don't realize, even if we realize, we don't accept that yes, we are having burnout. And I think this is very much important, especially for those who are in caregiving roles or in very high pressure jobs. So, what are some key contemplative practices you advise that can help prevent and recover burnout?
I spent decades, well, I'll be honest, decades in a cycle of burnout. I have ADHD, and so I will get really excited about something and I will throw my whole self into it and stay up late and get up early and every spare moment be thinking about this project or this thing.
Oh.
And then I would crash and I would have to um, take time off of work and not be the best parent that I could be because I had crashed so hard into this burnout and needed time to recover. And then as soon as I recovered, I would be so excited that I could then throw myself back into my work. And so this cycle continued for so many years. And finally, I realized that it didn't have to be that way. And the thing that helped me both to recognize that and start to change the patterns and the rhythms in my life in order to prevent that burnout cycle was to find things that help me to slow down. And part of that was scheduling fewer things for sure, but also my slowing down my expectations for myself and shifting from a mindset of be of the product of whatever I'm making and being more invested in the process of the project or whatnot. Um, and so each of these different contemplative practices have helped me in so many different ways. Body scans, which is uh, a type of contemplation, meditation, some breath work. It's kind of fits into several different categories,
Mhm.
but it's a moment where you pause and you, through slow, deep breaths, focus on every muscle group in your body, starting from the top of your head all the way down to the bottom of your feet and actively thinking of relaxing them. And the more that I practiced that, the more I started to recognize when tension was building up. And if tension was building up, that probably meant I was overdoing it. And so, continuing to add and explore and experiment with different contemplative practices helped me to create this rhythm of checking in with myself, and I was able to start noticing signs of, my specific individual personal signs of burnout and be able to immediately adjust so that instead of feeling like burnout is inevitable, like you said, we kind of have this perspective that burnout is just an inevitable part of life, but it's not. And contemplative practices have really helped me to readjust my pace and my expectations for myself.
Wow, inspiring. When you mention about staying late to finish the project and then getting up early, uh, it gives such an adrenaline rush, and at the same time it drains out the complete energy out of you, because 5 years back I was kind of in that position where I threw myself into that deep kind of rabbit hole. I was so obsessed, and immediately I didn't get the effects, but gradually, within I guess 3 or 4 months, burnout started to affect me, and it was horrible. It was horrible, and then I very much consciously decided to slow down things for me, because I, it kind of uh, grew upon on me that for me, my health, myself, is very much important than my work or anything else. Because if I am not there, then how I'm going to take care of my loved ones. So I think that's a very, very important point you made. And I think the kind of practices you shared, mindfulness plays a huge role, because when we are thinking about each muscle of our body, then it's kind of, inculcating the self awareness part, that, I can actually feel my breath, I can feel the tensions building up in my muscles. So I think that's something very, very amazing, Becky.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think back to that cycle of burnout
Yeah.
and the dopamine rush of throwing myself completely into it. It felt so good in the
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah.
But then the resulting crash doesn't feel so good.
No.
And learning that everything in moderation with our dopamine is just as important as in any other area of life.
True. That's true. That's true. And also, given that you work with women who have become disillusioned with their faith, what are some of the biggest challenges they face, and how do contemplative practices help them?
One of the hardest parts of this disillusionment with faith is the cognitive dissonance of wanting so desperately to believe and do the right thing, but also recognizing that what you're currently doing isn't working. And that is really painful and really difficult because sometimes the adjustments that you need to make, even if they're just exploring new contemplative practices, can have there's a fear that there will be great costs. And, you know, my background, personally, there was fear that meditation, that contemplation, mindfulness, all of these things were anti to my faith. And so it was scary to kind of step a toe out. And as I encourage people, women specifically, just to explore new practices, it's with so much gentleness and, like you said, self-compassion that you're just being curious. You're just saying, "Do I connect with the divine more deeply with this? Do I, um, do I sense a greater spiritual presence and reality with this?" And that is a long and slow, often scary and painful process, but I love how gentle and loving and kind contemplative practices are. You can't bring that same, um, determination. What am I trying to say? I'm losing my words here. You can't you um, you must be gentle with yourself when
Yes.
you practice contemplative contemplation and mindfulness and these contemplative practices because
Yeah.
you cannot practice them with intellectual rigor in the same way that, say, going to church and Bible study and really in-depth intellectual Bible study, that requires a lot. It requires effort, it requires energy, it requires learning, um, and we just don't always have that to give, and that's why finding the connection between contemplative practices and grief and mental illness and burnout has been really powerful for me personally, and I've found other people as well, because those are times in our life when we just don't have anything to give. And so for there to be faith practices that are based in gentleness and self-compassion, that it kind of feels like a miracle.
Lovely. That is lovely. And Becky, I'll give you some energy. So you are writing a book which focuses on contemplative practices for grief, mental illness, and burnout. So if you can give us a sneak peek into, what readers can expect from your book.
Sure. So the book is a series of essays on different contemplative practices. So I look back at ancient practices, Visio Divina, Lectio Divina, the Examen, different kinds of prayer, among others, and also practices that we don't necessarily think of as contemplative spiritual practices, like storytelling and community and travel and movement and stillness and solitude and curiosity and creativity. And in each essay, I just reflect on my own exploration and my own experimenting with that specific practice and what I've learned from others and kind of the greater mystery that lies within each of these practices and how they really transformed me in ways that I didn't expect. There are a couple that I'm very honest about. When I was challenged to try this practice, I thought it was silly and I wasn't gonna experience anything significant, and those in particular ended up being really life-changing. Um, and so I am determined in my writing, as always, to just be really honest and transparent and vulnerable and and it's okay to change your mind and be wrong and also to include humor in serious topics. So I'm really excited to be able to share it with people in the hopes that it will encourage them to do their own experimenting and be curious, because there will be resources in the book for how to experiment with each of these practices.
Mm, lovely, lovely. I think that sounds really, really incredible. So when can we expect it to be released, Becky, and where can listeners stay connected with your work?
Well, you can find me on my website, beckylmccoy.com, or social media at Becky L. McCoy. The book will come out sometime between December 2025 and March 2026. So as soon as I have details to share about pre-orders and all of that, it will be posted everywhere.
Lovely, lovely. Well, we'll have all the details in the show notes for our listeners. And Becky, thank you so much. This has been such a rich and meaningful conversation. And I absolutely love how you bring a gentle, trauma informed approach to spirituality. Such a warm approach to serious topics like grief and mental illness, especially for those of us who have. Uh, Gone through these experiences. So, thank you for sharing your wisdom and your journey with all of us.
Thank you so much for having me.
And to everyone listening, if you resonated with today's discussion, be sure to follow Becky on all of her platforms and make sure to keep an eye out for her upcoming book. I'll include all the links in the show notes for all of you. And as always, if this episode spoke to you, please share it with a friend or a loved one who might need this message today. Until next time, take a deep breath, be gentle with yourself, and continue to live mindfully. See you in the next episode of Mindful Living with Sana. Thank you.